So I've been on YouTube now for a little over a year, and I realized I've never explained what I do professionally. So this is that video. I'm going to tell you how I moved from being a traditional therapist to becoming an organizational psychologist. Okay, so when I graduated from college, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I thought I did. I wanted to be a therapist, so I went to USC and I got a degree in marriage and family therapy. In California, at that time, the professional counseling degree was marriage and family therapy. So that's what I got. I graduated and I had to make a decision. Do I want to go do private practice? Do I want to go work for some center? Or do I want to go get a PhD? I chose PhD not because I was particularly ambitious. I just really didn't have the kind of entrepreneurial spirit required to start a private practice. It felt like it was the safest bet just to sort of follow the structure of academia. So I made that decision. Went to University of Denver counseling psychology. And I think, you know, the first couple of years, I really enjoyed the experience and I really enjoyed the clinical work. But I did feel like the work was overwhelming. When you are a medical doctor, you get 3 years of training before you're ever exposed to patients. And then when you're exposed to patients, you're sort of exposed progressively. You have a lot of supervision and support for good reason, right? It's high risk, very tangible outcomes. For psychology, it's kind of the opposite. You are thrown in, I mean, as a master's level student, I was put in with clients on day one. And as a doctorate level student, you're put in with lots of clients or patients very quickly. And I was working at, we call them internships at, community mental health centers. We do them at hospitals, jails, wherever. But I sort of noticed that in all of my experiences, I was sort of emotionally overwhelmed by the experience. It is hard as a student to hear someone talk about really difficult life events back to back to back to back to back. And, as an intern, you have a manageable caseload. But I noticed that the people that worked in these different clinics or hospitals or centers or whatever, they're managing caseloads between 40 and 80 people, which is to me a totally overwhelming number. The client, you just like sort of can't do. You can't. To me, you can't really give all of yourself to that many clients. And I was in one of these clinics, and I was talking with my supervisor, and I found out that my supervisor, who was nationally known, was making. I think she was making like 64 grand a year. This is someone who has a PhD. This is someone who is absolutely exceptional at what she does, passionate about her work, and she's making 64 grand. So I was going, oh my God, I'm going to go through 2 years of master's program, 5 years of doc program, and at the end of it, I'm going to make 65 grand a year. And it felt to me like an overwhelming amount of work, emotionally distressing, and for no real sort of big outcome, financial outcome. And I was fortunate enough that the next internship I had was with the State Employee Assistance Program in Colorado, and the supervisor there was absolutely fantastic. And so he allowed me, there was a counseling program and there was a coaching program. And, I was there for the counseling work, but he allowed me to try executive coaching. And in the same day, I had someone that had significant OCD, but in a very debilitating way. And then after that session, I moved right into a public defender that was trying to figure out work-life balance and how he was going to manage his relationship and also excel professionally. And I was just so much more inspired by the conversation with the public defender. It was just a better fit for me. I think that as a therapist, I was a, kind of a B-level therapist. I am much more oriented towards an intellectual discussion than an emotional one. And for a therapist to be effective, a therapist has to be able to really emotionally connect with their client for a long time. So what happens is if you are sitting with a client and they are experiencing distress or trauma or intense emotion, your job as a therapist is to allow them to experience that and work through that on their own time. If you're over it or you can't tolerate it, and this client senses from you that this is difficult, the client will button it up, right? But you're sort of thwarting their process there. And that was hard for me because sitting with somebody for an hour while they were crying was emotionally distressing for me. And so I always sort of defaulted to a more cognitive model, which I think makes me a better fit for coaching than for therapy. So anyway, I saw that like there was this sort of opportunity with coaching. I fell in love with the fact that it was assessment, metric driven. You start coaching off with the collection of data. You start coaching off with very clear goals, very clear objectives and outcomes that not only does the client want, but the organization paying for coaching wants. And at the end of a 6-month or 12-month program, you better have made progress on those goals or you're not going to be hired again. I liked the fact that it was motivated in that direction. It's very different than therapy. Therapy is motivated. Your job as a therapist is to help the client, is to improve the client's well-being. But that's very different than performance. And so a therapist can be, I think, overly validating, right? Because their incentive is to support the client. Their incentive isn't necessarily to be truthful or to be transparent about what they think. The therapist, in therapy, I think it's easy to become stagnant. So I fell in love with the whole coaching world, consulting world, and I thought, well, how do I make this transition? So at whatever it was, 2 or 3 years into my program, I shifted my dissertation topic or my research focus. So the way people usually approach their dissertation in a doc program is they do research progressively geared towards whatever their end game topic is. And I was originally studying spirituality and meaning making. I was fascinated by the curative effect that spirituality has, both on someone who is sick or injured and on the people around them. But I realized that wouldn't help me, that expertise wouldn't help me transition into the business world. So I dropped that and moved into corporate culture. Corporate culture at the time was very in vogue, and in particular, I knew that construction was growing quickly in the Denver area. So I focused on creating a measure to evaluate corporate safety culture because I thought that it would be a good fit for construction. So in addition to the research, I also created an LLC called the Colorosi Group. And the goal was, I had no clients, but I just wanted to be able to show a track record of doing consulting work. So I had no clients, but I had this entity. And then I went onto LinkedIn and I found every single person that I could find, every kind of single shingle consultant that I thought could throw me some work. And I reached out to them. I had a list of, I think, 25 people. And I started at the bottom of the list, kind of the people that I thought would never really work with me, folks that were either too high ranking, folks that were too far away or whatever, people in New York. And I would call them and I would say, hey, I want 15 minutes of your time. Can I learn about how you do what you do? What does your job look like? And how can I get myself in your seat? And by the time I had, 15 of those interviews, I'm now getting to people that are local, they're in Denver, and they say they were more sort of viable options to support me. And I was practiced at that point because I had done 15 or whatever interviews, and I was actually able to get some of them to give me some work for free. I was doing pro bono support work, just trying to get some traction. So eventually when I graduated from my PhD, I was able to start or continue the Colorosi Group consulting work. And because I had a PhD now, I started a counseling practice simultaneously. And I told my wife, look, give me 1 year to see if I can get some traction here in the consulting world. I knew I could get work as a traditional counselor. I didn't know if I could actually get enough as a consultant. But I got really lucky. I think I put myself in the position to get lucky because I had all of these pre-existing relationships. I actually got a couple pretty big clients, and within 6 months, I was working, running leadership development for a local boutique consulting practice, and my career has kind of evolved from there. So now, what I do is I am an organizational psychologist. I no longer do any traditional therapy work. I would say I spend half my time doing assessment. That's pre-hire developmental assessments in a much more, this is not like Myers-Briggs type of assessment. This is very robust, assessments that are used to hire people. And then I would say probably 30% of my time is executive coaching, and the last kind of 20% of my time is helping with planning. So this is, change management, scenario planning, organizational network design, network analysis, that kind of work. And I can't tell you how, you know, I still identify as a traditional therapist in a lot of ways because I grew up doing that kind of work. And now I've been consulting though for whatever it's been, 12 years. And I couldn't be happier with the field. So thank you for listening. For those of you that are interested, I hope that was valuable.